Okay, this is my second video on the Chinese Blackbox. I've taken the screws out of the case. I don't think I have to show you guys how to take screws out of a box. Anyway, what I didn't show in my first series was when you first take the case apart and you pull it apart, you can't really get it too far because the wiring has got a tie wrap here, and over here there's a tie wrap here. So those have to be snipped before you can actually separate the two. So hang on just a sec. Okay, so once you snip those little tie wraps, as you can see, you can pull the case apart. And let me get this bright light here out of the way just a little bit. There we go. Not quite so. Alright, so anyway, you come down here, and this is one channel, this is another channel, and this is either your moonlights or the B channel, not sure which. Anyway, you simply pull these apart. Alright, that's better. Put the camera on a tripod. Anyway, alright, so on your connectors, you just press down and pull it apart. Press down, pull it apart, and press down and pull it apart. So again, there we have one wire up here, two wires up here, one wire over here. Okay. Now you've got the module, which is under here with your infrared. And as I said on the last video, there are three wires that connect it. Now this one is different than the version 2.0. This is one of the two boxes that I bought on version 1.0 back in December. So this one is not as hard to figure out for the fans. So this one with the long wire, and then again you have a clip to remove the multi-white right here, and then you just simply pull up on the two for the other. So we have this one here, this one here, and this one, whoops, over here. Now if you want, so that you don't get confused, because on the other one I did, and remember the fans wouldn't work, you can simply take and bundle these together with a little tie wrap, or a rubber band if you don't have tie wraps. I just happen to have some of these. And, well, let's turn it around so that it works. Well, heck, make life difficult. Let's just put that through there like that. There we go. Well, sorry to waste your time here. Here we go. Alright, and you can put that one through, and this one through, to keep them organized, and just pull it down. There you go. So there's no mistaking what three wires go back to your LCD module in order for your remote control to work, and obviously to program it. Okay. So this is the main board inside, actually the chassis, with your three fans, your two power supplies, your drivers here, and these are also LED power supplies. So I'm probably thinking that these are the drivers for the moonlights, and these are for the channel A and channel B, obviously only because of their physical size being so much larger. And again, this is a one power cord and not the two. Alright, so let's set that aside and bring this back into play. There we are. And we'll just check to make sure that, yeah, we are. Okay. Another thing to bear in mind, that you don't have to worry about the two on this side, because one is a male and has two pins, and the other is a female. So there's no way that when you plug this back together that you can get those crossed, okay? Pretty easy. Now, I showed you taking these screws out on the last video, so I'm going to skip that. I'm going to turn this off for a second and come back. Hang on. Okay. I saw on another video done by another hobbyist that he had to make sure to mark his diodes, his lenses, so that when he disassembled the box and took everything apart, that he would remember which ones he was working on. Well, on this particular model, again, you have two wires, two connectors on this side and one connector on that side, so it's fairly easy to remember, your orientation. Now, there are 11 diodes by 5, so obviously there's a 55. But on this version 1.0 box, the reds and greens fall right off of the center. So we count 5 in. This is the center diode, so I'm just going to take that off just so that I know where I'm working from. All right, because I'm old and I'm easily confused. Okay, so these two are the greens. And someone asked me about showing how to remove these things. Well, there's nothing to them. As you can see, they're just a simple little white plastic disc with a lens inside. And if you notice how they're designed, they fit right down over the diode and where the solder connection is. So you just sit it down on top of it and you give it a quarter turn, and that's it. I mean, it's on there. It is on there. So quarter turn and it comes right off. Simple as that. It's a friction fit. It's not voodoo. Okay. So here we go. We have got 2 green diodes to be replaced. I'm not going to go into a lot of this right here again because a lot of it's redundant from what was on the first video, but somebody did ask to have a little bit more background on soldering and unsoldering. In fact, I think somebody even alluded to another post, a video that's in the file section on the Chinese Blackbox LED proof group on some technique. They used a suction ball, which I don't like. I prefer solder wick. And I like solder wick because it really soaks up the excess solder. Someone also said you don't need solder wick because it doesn't get that hot, etc., etc. But what I found in my last video is as soon as you touch your soldering iron to that, it cools immediately. So this is not on, by the way, but this is just for illustration purposes. When you touch your soldering iron there to melt that, to remove the old diode, as soon as you remove your iron, it cools again. And because there's solder on there, you're right back where you started. But by using the solder wick and putting it over that solder and then placing your soldering iron tip over that, what in fact you're doing when you melt that copper braid allows that solder to flow up into the braid and it removes it from the solder joint itself. It leaves a clean job. It's very easy then to reheat that when you have your pliers, because you're not going to get these off by themselves without a tool. When you put your pliers on there and you go to remove the diode, you don't have to worry about your solder joints holding it to the heat sink. And by the way, this heat sink is a solid piece of aluminum. It's not quite 1/8 of an inch thick. I'm sure it's metric because, after all, these things are made in China, so they don't use the SAE system. They use the metric system. So I'd say maybe it's 3 millimeters, maybe 2 or 3 millimeters. Okay, so that's the technique that I use in soldering. I use solder wick. I don't use the bolt. I got this off Amazon for $2.13. It's 5 feet. It's 2.5 millimeters thick, or 2.5 millimeters wide. It's perfect for working on these boards. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to shut this off for a second because I'm going to go ahead and take these off. And again, it's redundant to show it again tonight, so I'll come back as soon as we're ready to put the new ones back on. Stay tuned. Okay, I'm going to succumb and do exactly what I told you I wasn't going to do. I wasn't going to show you removing the diodes because I did that on the first video, but I wasn't real clear on the desoldering technique, and since that is the case, I'm going to give you a little bit of real quick info here. I use a liquid soldering flux. This is a commercial product. Sometimes you can find it at hardware stores. Sometimes you can't. It comes in a little bottle. It's very, very poisonous. Okay, so anyway, it's liquid, and I've had this for a long time. Okay, let's go back. And where we were here. Alright. Come on, focus. Get in there. On this one here. Okay. Alright. Now, we got that settled. Let's get back to it. Alright. So, what I did was, I took and put some of the liquid flux on my solder wick, and all that's going to do is allow that solder to flow up into that wick so much quicker. I'm using a little heavier duty soldering iron than I normally do. This is 100 watt. Usually use a 35 watt pencil, but I'm going to use this one. And look at that. See how that soaked that up? See how you can see that? That soaked that right up into that braid. You take and snip that off. Take and snip that piece off. Because once it's up on there, you can't use it again. Alright. A little bit more. And we'll do the other side. And let's not use the screwdriver, let's use the soldering iron. I've not had anything to smoke tonight, folks, I promise you that. Okay. When you see the smoke, you'll know it's working. There we go. And again, we've got solder. Whoops. Snip that off. Alright. Alright, so we've got the bulk of the solder removed from the diode, and I'm going to go ahead and remove it. And again, as in last night, this wasn't easy to do, so I'm going to go ahead and use my pliers and remove the diode. As you can see, you can twist it, which I've done, because here's your contacts. The thing about it is, it's still glued to the board, and as such, it's not going to want to come off so that you can reuse it. It's going to snap. But just to make sure, since this is version 1.0 and my first video was on version 2.0, let's see if in fact that's the case. Let's remove that so I can get in there. Yeah, that's not coming off. Okay. So we'll go back with our pliers and have to break it. That's the core of the diode that's left. And what you got to do is just snap it off, just like that. Just snaps right off and just toss it out. Obviously, that's not going to be able to be reused again. I use 91% isopropyl alcohol. Most of the stuff that you see in the drugstores is 70% or less alcohol. And that's good for rubbing your joints and your muscles and stuff. But for cleaning up electronics and other things, like in my radio control modeling hobby, you got to use 91%. It's a great thinner for epoxy too. You can take that thick 5-minute or 15-minute epoxy, put a couple drops of that 91% alcohol in it, stir it up in a cup with a little swizzle stick, and it runs so smooth. Anyway, okay, here we are. We got another clean base in order to go ahead and replace our diode. Now, the board is marked. This is the positive side. This is the negative side. These all vary. They're not all going to be the same. This one over here might be the positive side, and this one might be the negative side, which in fact it is. So anyway, we're going to focus now again just on what we're doing. So hang on. Let's back out just a little bit. There we go. Yeah, this one here, this is positive on this side. This is negative over here. This one's positive, and that one's negative. Okay, we're going to take a break while I go get my extra diodes, and I'll be right back. Okay, these are the packets. These are the way the diodes are shipped. I got mine from AC Hobby. They came directly from China. You can get them off eBay, and they're cheaper, but you know what? I like buying directly from a factory and a manufacturer. Buying model airplanes is okay on eBay, but when it comes to stuff like this is serious, and I want to protect my investment. Anyway, okay, so these are Epistar 3 watt, which is what's on the original box. This particular packet is 20,000K to 21,000K. This packet is 14,000K to 15,000K, which are the standard that is on the box as we buy it. And then this packet, these are 9,000 to 10,000K. Alright, now let's pause for a moment again, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm going to replace the reds with two 65K LEDs. And I bought 4. They come packaged like this, and then I'm going to put 2 in each box. Okay, so we're going to get to that. Alright. This is the 6500K that I'm using to replace one of the red diodes. I used the solder wick and removed the solder from the board, or the heatsink rather, and determined that this is the negative terminal on this diode. And I can't really tell you or show you how I did that, other than to tell you that it is marked on the package, and the package gives you an idea of how to do that. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'll explain that in more detail here in a few minutes. Okay, now on the first box I did, I tinned the heatsink before I put the diode on. Problem with that was it put little lumps on there, and I couldn't get I wasn't sure that I was getting a good seat. So I'm going to do a little different this time. And again, I'm using the thermal silicone paste to ensure a good contact. This also acts as a cement. So I'll apply just a little bit. You don't want too much. A little bit of this stuff goes a long way. Okay. In fact, I got too much on there. Let's take some off. If any of you have ever replaced a CPU on a computer, you know that when you put the heatsink on, that you got to use something called Arctic Silver, which is another thermal compound that is essential to keeping your CPU from overheating. Anyway, we're not doing computers tonight. We're working on an LED Blackbox, so I'll shut up. All right, wipe that off. Now, where'd my diode go? Okay. And again, we have to make sure that we're on the negative side. Polarity counts all the time. Okay. So negative is on this side, and this is negative here. And I'll press that down. I should have done it this way on the first box, but it was my very first attempt, and I've never done this before, so I was justifiably nervous, especially knowing you guys were watching. So let's get that on there. Let's make sure it's centered. I want it centered so that when I put the lens back on, that it's not crooked. Okay. So So, just waiting for my iron to heat up here a little bit. There we go. And I'm using, again, the liquid solder flux. I'll try to do this so that you can see what I'm doing and not block your view. I don't want to touch the plastic of the diode itself. I need to do this one over a little bit. Yeah, see, I pushed it off center. So when I put the lens on, it's going to be a little crooked. But if you promise not to tell, I won't say a word either. Okay? All right. Remember, I'm an old guy. I'm over 60 years old. And I'm not as steady as I used to be. Some people would probably tell you I've never been steady, but that's another story. Okay. Take a look. Yeah, it looks fairly good. I don't like that compound oozing out from under the diode. I don't think that that's down as far as it could go. Yeah, we'll see. Okay. All right, going to turn you off while I remove this one. I'm sorry, remove this one, and I'll be back when I'm ready to resolder. Stand by. Okay, get ready to put on the second 6500K diode. And again, we've applied the silicone thermal paste just a little bit right there on the bare heatsink. And again, we have determined the negative pole on the diode and place it on the heatsink. It's a little squishy. You like that word, squishy? There we go. Get it centered again because I want to keep it right there as close as I can for the lens. I mean, who's going to know? I know. Alright. Here we go. This time I'm going to attempt to try to hold it in place. I don't think it's going to work very well. Let's just go ahead and... This really isn't hard to do. And I have the soldering iron that I have only because I do build radio control model airplanes, and I do wire servos, and I do work with batteries and NiCads and lithium oxide or lithium ions and all kinds of different batteries and connectors. So I did not go out and buy this soldering iron just to do this job. I already had it on hand. You could probably do it with an inexpensive 35-watt Radio Shack, if they're still in business. Radio Shack pencil soldering iron, but I prefer hot heat right up front. Get it on there, get it out, get done. All right. Lens is on. Whoops. Yep, okay. Anytime I hear a snap, I worry. Alright. Wow. Pretty close. Pretty close. Alright, now we've replaced the two reds. Now we're going to replace the two greens. And we're going to use a different LED temperature for that. And I'll make that decision and get right back with you. Let you know what I'm doing. Okay. I've taken the solder wick and removed the excess solder. Now I'm going to remove the diode again from the heatsink. There we go. Once you get a little bit of a turn on it, see how it turns? Now, you still can't get it off the heatsink, like I said before. I know I'm repeating myself. So, you just destroy all of that, and then take your pliers and snap off the, snap off the base. Alright, there we go. Now, because the green is on a separate channel, we're going to be reversed. When we did these two diodes, this was the positive, this was the negative and this was the positive. On this one, this is the positive and this is the negative, so it's exactly the opposite of what we just did. Now, I'm going to replace one diode here. I'm not going to use pairs, I'm going to split them up. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to use a 10,000K diode on this one and a 6500K over here. Now, I would put both two 6500s, but I only bought three. And if I do it like this on this box, I want to be able to mimic it exactly the same on the other box. So if I'd have been smart and bought four of them, I could have done 2 and 2. But as it stands now, I'm going to have to do 1E and 1E. So anyway, here we go. Pull out one diode. This is the 10,000K. Actually, it's rated 9,000 to 10,000K. When I did my metal halides years back, I used a 10,000K metal halide, 400 watt, with 420 watt nanometer actinic tubes. But back in those days, they weren't T5s, folks. They were T12s. I'm sure there's a few of you out there that remember what a T12 is. Okay. Checking out the bottom of the diode. This one has absolutely no marking. That's interesting. Not on the, oh, I take it back. There it is. Wow. That is tiny, tiny. Okay, so this is the positive terminal, so we're going to set it right there like that. So this side is positive, this side is negative. Get our thermal compound again. I put a little bit too much on last time, so this time I'm only going to use that much. I want to spread it out so that it covers the entire plate, or rather the entire base. When you press down, it will squish out a little bit. Okay. Alright. I have a pair of needle nose. Don't know where they are, so I'm using these blunt nose. Okay, there we are. Good. I try to get I usually wait a few seconds for the iron to warm up before I actually attach the solder. And, you know, I can't say that that's any more desirable than not. This side over here is pretty crappy. Let's redo this. Okay. I haven't been around too many other hobbyists in the reef keeping, because back in the day when I was doing it, I mean, we were all a bunch of rugged individuals, and we had a magazine called FAMA that everybody bought every month. Tropical Fish Hobbyist was mostly freshwater. They were really into denial at that time. They didn't want to admit that saltwater was taking over the industry. But anyway, be that as it may, there we go. We didn't have photography. We were still using 35 millimeters, and unless you had an expensive lens, it was hard not to get flash on the glass when you would take a photograph. So photography of our aquariums was not real, you know, wasn't really in its heyday like it is today with digital. There we go. Alright. Stand by. Alright. I just realized something. That on version 2.0 that I've already done,